get this thing going early. Steve Wyche and I talked about the Vikings schedule. And in the first 6 games, in my opinion, because I've told you guys on the show what I thought. I thought, and I did it for the Vikings on Vikings.com as well. I thought the Vikings can go, 5-1, 4-2 in that first 6. Steve Wyche might have a different opinion. Steve, when you look at the Vikings start of the season, they go to London and then they got the bye week. We know the Saints just added Jarvis Landry, so that does add another weapon to that team. But what do you think about the Vikings schedule early on before the bye?
Yeah, I think it's really challenging. I mean, look, you open at the Packers, and when is that ever easy? We can continue to say that their wide receivers, they need some help. They have one of the best defenses in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
I mean, they get after. That defense is really good and only got better this offseason with some of the additions that they made. That's going to be a challenge. That game at Philadelphia is going to be tough. I mean, first off, you see some of the changes. They added A.J. Brown, right? That's going to test – with those receivers now, with Devontae Smith, that's going to test that Viking secondary. That's going to take a minute to come together, right? They're changing scheme. They're changing coordinators. That's going to take a second. So that's going to be a challenge. The Lions, not going to be a tough out this year, but let's go ahead and, games at home in Minnesota. At the Saints are going to be a team that we're going to be talking about at the end of the season. I mean, where really is a hole on that roster? Maybe quarterback Jameson's come back healthy. Maybe. I mean, that's a maybe. Jameis is playing pretty well before he got hurt last year. He got hurt before the halfway point of last season. All indications are that he's good to go. But again, one of the best defenses in the NFL year in and year out. People do not give them credit. That has been the staple of this team year in and year out as a defense. That defense got better, adding Tyrann Mathieu to the leadership that they have on that defense. The Bears, W. Not going to be a good team with Chicago games in Minnesota. And then Miami, first off, that early in the season, they have to travel all the way down to Miami. What happens to teams in September and October in Miami? Boy, it's humid down here. It's really hot. The Dolphins roster, by all accounts, is one of the more talented rosters in the NFL. Now, it's going to take a minute to bring all that talent together, especially with a new head coach and some of the things they're going through there. That is not an easy game. I don't see a layup except for maybe the Bears on the schedule, and that's a division game. I think it's weird how they got the first 3 division games staggered at home, and then they actually have to get on a plane and travel a little bit, even though they're only going out of the time zone twice. Those first 3 games, those are not going to be easy games. I'm telling you right now, Philadelphia's going to be better. The Saints are going to be better. Miami is going to be a tough out, and the Packers with that defense, those are going to be challenges.
Yeah, for me, I thought I have them beating the Packers just because it's at home. I think the Vikings and Packers match up pretty well. Eagles was the one I did. I said they would lose to the Eagles. But for some reason, Jameis Winston, for me, his interceptions, some of his mental errors now with a 3-4 defense he's going to have to face is going to be some question marks there. But I do see what you're saying about Tyrann Mathieu, Jarvis. I mean, they are getting better and better and better. And, of course, this is a staff that can take Jameis Winston and maybe get out of him what the Bucs couldn't. But looking at the Vikings schedule after that, so now you got the Cardinals, you got the Washington football team, the Commanders now. You got the Buffalo Bills, Cowboys, Jets, New England, Colts. Of course, we have division guys, and you have the Giants. Of those games, what's the most intriguing game from an NFL Network standpoint when you guys are looking at what game you're going to circle for Vikings, whoever?
Well, to me, I don't want to speak for the network, but to me, when I look at this, the Week 15 game against the Colts, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the Vikings are going to be there. I think the Vikings are going to be in the playoff hunt when all is said and done. I think people aren't respecting them right now, maybe because of the coaching change, and there's always the whole Kirk Cousins, what is he, what he's not. I think the Vikings defense, za'darius Smith is healthy and some of the changes they made and Lewis Cine and some of these guys that they added, the younger players. By this point, they should be rocking and rolling, right? I think the Colts are going to be one of the best teams in the NFL, adding Matt Ryan, some of the pieces that they made, right? We're not talking about them enough. So by this time, both these teams are going to be really pushing for playoff spots. But why it's also intriguing for the Vikings is the next week, they're going to have to get geared up for that game against the Colts, right? Mm-hmm. Next week they play the Giants. So you're like, okay, that might be the game they could take the foot off the gas. But then the Packers are there next week, right? So sandwich, that Bears that Giants game is sandwiched in between 2 potentially huge games for them. So that's why I think it's intriguing. It's going to really test their mental makeup because again, I think the Vikings are going to be there for a playoff berth in the NFC. It's a little bit more open. I think they're really going to push the Packers this year in that division. And I just think the Colts are just going to be an excellent team, 2 dome teams. So I really, when I looked at the schedule, that's going to be a really good game at the timing of the season it's a potential flex game. As you see that TBD kickoff is right next to it as well.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's going to end up being a real high profile game.
Yeah, and so the NFL, it's kind of like you got the old regime, the Belichick's, the Bruce Arians is done now, so he's moved on, and but he's still in the building. And then you have these young guys. You have the McVays, you have the Shanahans. It's becoming their NFL now. Matt LaFleur, Zach Taylor. Do you think Kevin O'Connell is of that makeup? Because I know there's some coaches that come in new, young, and they don't last long. It's 3 years, and they're out the door because they can't figure out how to get it going. Do you think Kevin O'Connell, learning from McVay, he can become one of these Zach Taylor, Matt LaFleur type coaches where he'll find lightning in the bottle within 2 years?
Well, I do, because the Vikings roster is built to win now. I mean, they're adding some pieces to develop, some of the people, things they drafted, but, you go out and you sign za'darius Smith. I mean, that's a short-term add. Kirk Cousins is where he is in his career. Dalvin Cook is where he is in his career. Adam Thielen. So I do think the Vikings have some staying power, but I also think that Kevin O'Connell can come in and win right away just because of the structure of the roster. I live in LA. I was around the Rams a lot. So talking to people who are around Kevin, like, oh yeah, no, he's a dude. First off, he's a former player. So he looks the part, tall guy, walks in front of the room. He's immediately going to command respect. He brings in a defensive coordinator, Ed Donatel, who's got a ton of cachet and gravitas throughout the league, can maybe fill in some of the blanks that Kevin doesn't know about being a head coach just because he's been around so long. So, Kevin O'Connell's taking a page out of Sean McVay's book. Remember when Sean first came to LA, he hired Wade Phillips.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody who could fill in the blanks. So that was a nice little subtle move by Kevin. So yeah, I think they can come in and win right away. His relatability to players is huge. The one thing you hear about all of these kind of McVay Shanahan disciples is their relatability to players. They're not just great play designers or play schemers and play callers. They communicate with everybody on the roster to explain things, how to function individually, how to function among your position group, and then how to function in totality. And you speak to people like Andrew Whitworth and guys who've played, and Fred Warner, who plays, for Shanahan, and they're like, that means everything. When you know where you fit in every layer of this game, it helps you understand why you're doing the things you do. And again, Kevin has learned that, and everyone you talk to says, he'll be able to convey that.
And so looking at Mike Zimmer's defense, this team was always defense. Minnesota Vikings defense. That's all everybody talked about. You talked about how great they were, top 5 defense. The last 2 years, due to injury, Mike Zimmer's defense has struggled. Last year, particularly, when you look at almost 37% third down. Mike Zimmer normally was in the 25% range for third downs. They jumped almost 12 basis points up. They were almost 37% on third down, which was a huge reason why they could never get off the field, and that's what defense is about. What's a success story? You talk about Ed Donatel being added, sneaky move, Wade Phillips type of move by McVay. What do you think success means for the Vikings? The Vikings 2022 defense is successful because what?
Well, I mean, you can't be 27th in scoring, right? Let's bring that closer to the midway point. 16, 17, 18, at the worst. I mean, the NFL, you could take, the Mike Zimmer always prided himself on being like top 8 always in the 5 major defensive categories, run, pass, scoring, third down, and takeaways, right? Today's defense is about scoring and it's about takeaways and third down, like you said. So bring those more to the middle of the pack, because I think what they're going to be to do offensively is going to offset any potential weaknesses. And there's going to be some shootouts and there's going to be some grind out games. But they've got to be able to bring that scoring total down, the opposing scoring total down closer to 23, 22, if they want to be in there. And they got to get the takeaways. I mean, that was something else that was really lacking. You got to get takeaways and give your offense additional possessions to have a chance in the NFL. Then you mentioned the third down flaws. They've just got to be regular. You look at the playoff teams, and again, you got to be better in that area. Donatel is a bend but don't break guy, but he's also a guy who's got defenses that get high takeaways, and that's really going to be huge when you look at some of the teams that they play and some of the balance that some of those teams have on offense.
And the Vikings traded with the Packers and the Lions. And a lot of people always say, don't trade with your direct enemy. But the Vikings figured out, if we can get something out of it, let's do it. But everybody seems to think they lost the trade to the Lions. Packers maybe something just had to be done. What was your thoughts when you saw those trades being made by Kwesi?
Look, to fall back 20 slots, 20 plus slots, was kind of like, whoa, and the people you talk to, that's a big drop just in terms of, some of the talent you could be forsaking. But if some of the people they had on their board were going to be there in the second round, you're like, okay, well, I get economic value. I'm going to get some additional draft capital. But otherwise, I think, look, they came back in and they got seen. So, I'm like, we could sit here and make all these judgments, but let's wait and see.
Yeah.
Because if everyone says, oh, man, Lewis Dean at 32, wow, what a value pick. They slid back 20, but, man, now they've got a 5-year Pro Bowler, a guy who's captain of their defense at some point. That's a different story. So the immediate return, you can say what you want to say. You just don't know. But a couple of years from now, it's when you really be able to judge this. But here's the thing. I love the aggression. And look at all the young GMs. I mean, Brad Holmes for the Lions in his second year trading with Kwesi in his first year in moves like that. And you saw all of these trades going on. And you mentioned earlier about some of the old guard. Hey, you don't do this. You don't trade within your division. There's no rules anymore. It's about making your model and your team better. And that's what Kwesi clearly thought he was doing.
And last one, get your popcorn ready. So that's what I grew up with playing when Terrell Owens played. I remember playing the Eagles, Ravens, Eagles. Terrell Owens is on the other side with Donovan McNabb. And, even though I wasn't on defense, so it didn't matter to me, I loved watching him play. And so now I look at Justin Jefferson. You got Devonta Smith. So that game's going to happen. Eagles, Vikings, direct trade correlation as well. They missed on picking Justin Jefferson. So that's going to get hammered into the ground that week. And then you got the Bills. That's another direct trade. Stephon Diggs goes to the Bills. Because of that trade, Vikings actually get what's his name, because that was their pick, Justin Jefferson. So two teams that kind of correlate to this Justin Jefferson nexus, I guess I'll call it. That Bills game, though, Stephon Diggs versus Justin Jefferson, all the energy, the attitude, the Josh Allen is better than Kirk Cousins conversation. What is that week going to look like?
I love how you put that together. I didn't even think about that, Ron. So well done. No, it's going to be huge because the Bills, that's one of the 2-3 teams we're talking about as potentially being, in the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl, because they went out and got Dalvin's brother. Don't forget that. They have James Cook, as their rookie running back, who everyone says is going to be exceptional right there. And they just made some very subtle moves this offseason. They're one of the best run organizations in the NFL. So that's going to be huge. And that's one where Kevin O'Connell and these guys, they can't get caught up in the hype of things and let the players go out and play.